Hello, everybody. Welcome to another Symfony meetup. I'm just waiting for the first of our speakers to join us. He's not joined yet. I was speaking to him just a moment ago, but we're just going to give him another couple of minutes to jump in. But look, thank you for joining us for the April meetup. This year's going so quickly. Welcome to I better turn off my the computer. I forgot I had that running. So yes, so technical problems aside, thank you for joining us. The year is going so quickly, and I can't believe we're already in April. And the sun is beginning to shine. Here we go. Anjana is with us now. I'm so sorry. I missed letting you in here. But we've got an exciting couple of talks to give tonight. So first of all is documenting API endpoints with MSON. And then secondly, later on, we've got Pauline Voss with implementing social login on your Symfony websites. And a couple of sponsors, first of all, to thank. So we've got Level 5, first of all, who are sponsoring a book prize for tonight, which is going to be, I think tonight's book is going to be Grokking Algorithms, which is a book that I've been told by a few people is definitely making some waves. And it's a really fun book to read. And it's all about things like understanding hash tables and binary trees. And there's pictures of mice and cartoons and weasels and things in there. So it's a really good fun book. I've got a copy myself, but we will send you a brand new copy. Don't worry, it's not going to be my battered one that we send out. Thank you to Lendable, who are sponsoring the video setup for tonight, or at least my Zoom account, which allows us to bring this the meetup straight into your living rooms from here. And thank you to JetBrains as well, who are supplying us with licenses to raffle off to give to you. And if you want to join the raffle, go to symphonymeetup.org.uk and enter your details. I'll pop that into the chat on the YouTube as well in just a moment. So without further ado, let me introduce tonight's first speaker. Now, this is a speaker that I'm excited about welcoming to the stage, because he's been a member of the Symfony user group for so long, and with each meetup he's always tweeting saying, "Oh, we're about to begin. This is going to be great." He's always tweeting out pictures of his little dual screen setup, usually with his dinner, as we start going with these with these meetups, and really is kind of always just really pushing what we're doing. And it came about, so tonight's talk came about was that he pinged me on Twitter some time ago and he said, "I've just built this tool in Symfony. What do you think about it? Can you give me a review?" And I had a look through and I thought, this is really interesting. I quite like this. Let's get a presentation for it. So I'm so happy to welcome Anjana to what I believe is his first meetup presentation, and I'm sure everybody at home is going to be giving you a big round of applause and welcoming you to the stage. Anjana, welcome. I'm going to allow, make sure, there we go. Right, you should be able to share your screen. Everybody, please, once again, give a big round of applause to Anjana and welcome him to the Symfony meetup.
Right, thank you, Neil. And my name is Anjana Silva, and I work as a web development team leader at my HSM. And I'm really thrilled to present my API documentation tool to you guys. And before I actually start my presentation, I would like to thank massively to Neil and everyone at UK Symfony Meetup Group to give me this wonderful opportunity to present my API documentation tool. I'm going to share my screen. Right, I hope you can see my screen. Perfect, thank you. And today I'm going to present you a tool which I created some time ago to manage and create API documents using a really simple syntax called mson. And the backend of the application is powered by Symfony API framework. So you know that it's very powerful and flexible and scalable. And my presentation, first I'll be talking about why a good API documentation matters. And then I'll be discussing some areas that I think could be improved in the existing API documentation tools. And then I'll be covering my new API documentation tool, as well as I'll be giving some demonstration about mson. And then we'll get some hands-on experience on the tool as well as mson and future enhancements of the product. Right, let's begin. So why a good API documentation matters? It's an essential document, obviously, which explains your services. And if you have a solid API document, means for internal as well as external users, it will become easy for them to use your document and get the job done. Hence, you will have your API experts working on your APIs instead of supporting your users or API users. And the API documentation not just helps your techies or developers or with a technical background, it should help everyone as well, whether they have the same level of background or not, to get the big picture. And if you have a solid document or good document, it improves the user satisfaction because it's clear and can get the job done without a hassle. And so what makes a solid API document? The document must be easy to follow, and it needs to be simple, but still powerful enough to give enough information so they can make use of it without any help, and a well-organized structure. What I meant by well-organized structure is you should be able to group your endpoints in a logical manner. For instance, nowadays you already realize that to call an API, first you need to get some authentication endpoints to call and get some tokens and so on. So it makes sense to arrange those authentication endpoints in the top of the document, and then the data or the CRUD side of the endpoints at the bottom of the document, or however logically you wish to arrange it. So a well-organized structure really matters. And testable code examples. So that helps the developers, whoever using the endpoint, to know, all right, this is how it should be. And it needs to be mobile friendly. Moving on to the next section of my presentation, I would like to talk about some areas that when I was using existing API documenting tools, there are lots of nice tools, obviously, and just lots of amazing features. However, though, I noticed that the look and feel of the API document could be either simplified or improved. So it kind of the document gives some sort of flavor to the endpoint customer, if you like, some sort of a customization ability. And the structure of the document can also be improved in many of those tools, so it makes sense, or it can be arranged in a logical order. And obviously, it's good if the tool uses easy to learn language, such as mson, which I will cover in my next slides. And most importantly, the non-tech personnel, if decides to take care of the API documentation or management side of the company, that person should be able to create or manage, get access to the document or manage the things without lots of technical background. So I find this great existing tools, it's a bit difficult or challenging for a person from non-technical background to come in and create documents and share those documents in a simplified approach. And also a document must be able to easily manage. So for instance, what I meant by this is, imagine like a large company, they already have the system built, and what they want to do is they just need to get their documents and deliver to desired target audience or customers. To do that, they might not necessarily hire technical people to do that. So an easy way to create documents, maintain, and obviously share can be simplified in these platforms. So when I wanted to maintain some of my API endpoints, which I created some time ago, and also to share with the designated audience. So when I was going through these existing products, I thought these things could be improved, and why not I merge the good stuff and build up my own tool, which tick the boxes that which I find lacking in the current products. So this leads me into move to the next slide, which is creating my own documentation tool, which is apidocumenter.com. So what is apidocumenter.com? It's an online platform built using Symfony API framework for the backend, which creates API documents which are user-friendly for your endpoints. And it uses a very easy to learn language, a syntax called Emson, which I'll be covering in one of my next slides. And using Emson resource groups, this tool helps you to group your endpoints in a logical order. And this tool provides you the ability to, or give you the option to change or edit your document and see instant preview side by side. And also it has an inbuilt blueprint validator where the tool validates your correctness of the syntax. And also the option to straight run your endpoints from the document itself, or grab the CURL and run it elsewhere, which I'll be covering in my presentation. And also the tool provides you a very simple approach to organize and control access to your document, make it private, public, and make it publish or unpublished. And obviously share your documents with customers. To help me explain this point well, I'm going to bring up this image, which in the tool, when you create a document, you can attach a document to a customer, and you can attach users to the customer, where you can share your document to designated customers or designated users. So this is the document sharing model this API document offers you to the users. So we talked about many times Emson. We mentioned Emson. So what is Emson? Emson is Markdown syntax for object notation, which is a really easy, human-readable plain text form representation data structure, which if I bring up a very simple screenshot, which tells you how you would write a basic endpoint like get your messages in a Emson way. This is how you would write it. I will for your benefit, and I will cover these elements in the screenshot. As you can see in the very top, there's a format for your document using Emson, which is the metadata of the document, which has a version attached to it. And in this screenshot, you'll find this group syntax and the message. So that means this message is a group of endpoints, a collection, if you like. And each group, we have number of endpoints. In this example, we only got one, and has an endpoint, a URL called messages, and a description. And in this arrow where you see, it tells this endpoint which uses get and some meaningful description to your endpoint. And in the next arrow, you see how the request is formed and what are the headers if need to be sent, and what will the response be if it's 200, and what the headers of the response will be, and the body. as you can see, it's fairly straightforward and it's very much readable because it's in plain English, and it's logical in terms of the sequence. And Emson is open source and under MIT, and it's very easy to learn. But there are plenty of examples in apiblueprint.org website. And there's another good thing about Emson is you can better design your endpoints using data structures. What I mean by this is, for instance, if you look at this screenshot on the right-hand side, this says as an endpoint to bring blog posts using get. And a blog post brings list of blogs, an array of blogs, which is a type of blog. So on the left-hand side on the screen, you will see a blog has an ID, text, and author. So you can actually describe an endpoint or describe a result using data structures. You can neatly arrange using data structures. That's another good thing on Emson. And there's a wider community support where GitHub recognizes .apib extension and plethora of tools and implementation for testing or for parsing, such as Thread. Right, I talked a lot. Just kidding. I would like to do some hands-on going forward, and to help me with that, let me bring up my browser to the screen. I hope you can see my screen. And so this is one of the documents I created using the tool. This is an API document for a store called Supermarket Store, obviously a test document, which I created for the presentation. And as you can see, it has a logo and a title and some introduction and the endpoint. And as I described before, there are lots of chances that you will need to define your authentication endpoints at the top of the document, and then the data endpoints, the CRUD operations. As you can see, there are a couple of endpoints under authentication and few under data. And if you drill down into one of these things, you get all the information that you required to, for instance, get an authentication token. It tells you what this endpoint is, what the URL, and what would the request be, and what will the response be. And if it's successful, it returns like this. And if it's unsuccessful, returns like this. And also the tool also gives you the opportunity to straight run endpoints without leaving the document. For instance, if you click this run button, it opens up a pop-up where you can enter inputs and straight run and see the result. For this presentation, I have created it. I'm going to run this endpoint. I'm going to copy a previously created token, which I will need to run this API, which I'm going to paste in here. And I'm going to press run. When you run, you will see the API will get called here. And also, if this is not enough, obviously you can copy the CURL, like pressing CURL here and opening up a tool like Postman, which I will be bringing to the screen now. So you have Postman, and you go to File, and you go Import, and go to raw text, and you just paste the copied CURL, and you press Continue, press Import, and I will be using a previously generated token for this because this endpoint needs a secret to call. And when you call this, you get the result. So it has the ability either to straight do the testing from the tool or take it elsewhere and do the testing. And yeah, I'm not going to obviously cover all these other elements. Just want to show you a quick another example. API documentation created for a CRM seed, which has authentication endpoints and endpoints to bring membership information, to bring invoice information and transactions, events, and so on. So you can arrange things in a more logical order. And obviously you can use navigation if you want to get to the endpoint. Right, I am going to now show you how I created this, or the Emson behind this document. To do that, I'm going to log into my tool, and So this API document is a tool I created, and as soon as you log in, you will be directed to a page where you have all your endpoints. And this is the one I was showing you earlier. What I'm going to do is I'm going to press edit. When you press edit, you will be presented with this screen where on the left hand side you have an MSON editor, and on the right hand side where you see your end result. And as I showed you in the example earlier, in the MSON example, it starts with a format, which is the metadata. And I have added this host to support the platform so you can get the URL in the document. And it is very, very straightforward. You define hash, and that becomes the title of the documentation and some description. And then here you see the groups where you can arrange endpoints inside groups. To get give some flavor for MSON, what I'm going to do is I'm going to quickly add another endpoint under authentication to destroy authentication token. To do that, I'm going to simply copy one of these endpoints and paste it under get authentication token. So I'm going to get some space first, and I'm going to copy get authentication token, and I'm going to paste it here. When I paste, you will see that you get an error. That's because I can't have obviously same endpoint twice. This now tells you there's an error in the line 48, which is the token, /token endpoint is already defined. So this actually gives you a meaningful information to debug. If this is not enough, you can obviously click here and go to the API Blueprint website and get more information. And I'll touch base on that before I come out from the tool. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to change the endpoint to, let's say, destroy token. And once I do this, then this document will get updated and you will see the third endpoint. I'm going to give it a name saying destroy authentication token. And obviously, I'm not going to write down the entire thing. So it will be different to your specific requirement. You will be giving a meaningful description, and you'll be arranging the request, what the request will be, what are the headers, and what will the response be, and what will the response body be. And this is how quickly you can stick another endpoint to the document. And if you want to add a whole group to the document, let's say we got authentication group and we got data group, and if you wish to add let's say a report, what you can do is I'm just going to copy one of these groups again. And previously I copied just an endpoint. Now I'm going to copy with the group, and I'm going to get some space at the end, and I'm going to paste it here. As I paste, you will see that my endpoint has some semantic problems, which is the token is already defined and the group authentication is already defined. So that tells me I need to change my group. So I'm going to change it to reports and obviously give some meaningful description in your case and change the endpoint. And when this refreshes, you will have the third block, and you can customize it the way it suits your requirements. Instead of obviously get authentication token, it will be get reports or products or something like that. Obviously, it's specific to your requirement. And this is how easily you can add a group to the document. And there are lots of other validations MSON supports. For instance, you can if you define the same header twice, and it gives you some sort of validation. Because, for instance, I just copied and pasted secret header, and it says secret header is already defined as a duplicate. So it gives you some meaningful validation where you can get some help as you code. So we just edited one of these documents which we showed earlier. So I'm going to go back, and so this is the main sort of dashboard where you have all the endpoints. And for you, if you like to create a new document, it's very easy. Just come here, add new document, and just give your document a meaningful name. Let's say Symfony meetup. And as I mentioned earlier, you need to stick a document to a customer. I have created a few customers before, so I'm going to attach to one of my customers, and I'm going to make this document private. It means anyone from that customer will be able to, are the only people who can access this document. And I'm not going to make it publish because I'm just going to create, and there's an option you can populate sample data. What happens is when you tick this box, when you create, it creates that marvelous store endpoint as a starting point, where you document as a starting point, then you can make use of it and change it to how you like your endpoint document to be. So I'm going to press create, and that document will get added here. And this is your document with some predefined data. Obviously, you can give your document some sort of a flavor to match with your organization or your audience by clicking this change, by pressing this change logo button, and you can just stick a logo from your machine. And if you like to crop, you can just give it a crop and just to suit your resolution. And here's the logo here. And if you go now preview, and you will see that this document will get updated with the logo and so on. So just some sort of a customizing ability to the document. Right, and it's going to go back. If you want to create customers, it's very easy. Just go to my customers and add new customer, stick a name and press create, and that will get added to this list. And go to my users and add new user to attach users to that customer. It's very easy, and just pick a customer from the list and tie it with an email. And what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to quickly share this document with one of my other user accounts I created before. To do that, if you want to share this document with a customer, you go to this list and press this access, and it will take you to a different page. And on this page, you'll be able to see who are the customers who already got access to this. As I created this with my test customer, you can see it here. To add more customers, you can click the set up new access and pick customers from the list, and that will get set up as well. So I'm going to open up another browser, and I'm going to log in as one of my other accounts. Right. Just to show you that where it is appearing in the customer account. I'm going to paste my password, and if you go to the shared with me section on the left, you can see that the document is appeared here, and it's not currently published because I didn't publish it. If you try to view this, and you will get a message saying it's not published, check back later. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the document, and I'm going to make it published by go to edit, and there's a tick here. You can just tick publish, and that will, if I just give a refresh, this is my other account, customer account. If I give a refresh, that will be published, and obviously I can view that document. And hence this is private. If you are signed out, you can't see this document. Just going to copy this link, and I'm going to hope I copied the correct one, copy link, and go to sign out and paste, and you won't be having access to this because it is private to that customer. Right, and this kind of comes to the end of the tool. And that if you need more information, or if you are new to MSN, if you would like to learn MSN, and there are lots of examples in this API Blueprint website, which there are specifications, cheat sheets, and all sort of examples here. And if you go to tools section, and that under editors, you can also see my tool is listed on this side. So this is the sort of body who maintains API blueprint, which is the MSN format on the web. So happy to say that my tool is listed there. And so this kind of ends the presentation about this MSN and the tool. I'm going to sign out, and I'm going to bring back my presentation slide again. Right. So yeah, we were here, and as a future enhancements, thinking of improving MSN supportability on the tool. We currently do not support everything MSN has to support because it's a vast amount of syntaxes, and it does lots of good things. But it supports enough for you to create a beautiful document and get your message delivered to your target audience without a problem. And also thinking of making the tool so many people can collaborate and write documents and obviously see edits and change logs and give the ability to group APIs inside the platform in a logical manner, like collections, and obviously to give more UI templates and themes for your document, so it makes more closer to your company's colors and logos and fonts and so on. As you can see, currently the document organizes the contents, organizes in a what I described on the left side of the screenshot, and maybe just to give it a different way how to show it, and maybe some other ways. If you have any ideas, yeah, please feel free to give your ideas to me. And right, and that's it from the presentation. And once again, thank you, Neil and everyone at UK Symfony Group and whoever tuned in here to watch this presentation. And if you like the tool, please give it a go and let me know what you think about it. And if you like to stay in touch, I'm on Twitter and LinkedIn, and feel free to reach. Once again, thank you very much, Paul. I'm handing control back to Neil.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Anjana. That was super interesting. I really like how you've evolved actually the tool since the first time you asked me to take a look at it. I've written. I haven't had any questions through the chat yet. There's still a bit of time for everybody who wants to, if anybody wants to ask some questions through the chat. But I've written down, I don't know, maybe 5 or 6 points and questions. I think the first one, actually, I quite like the fact that it's geared towards non-tech personnel. And what I've actually written down here is I think it's like an API documenting version of BHAT. So it'd be something where people can, like Cucumber or Gherkin, where it's human readable, and I really like that as a kind of feature of the MSON notation, because it means that if you're working on a platform, I guess, where an API is a big feature, maybe you're like doing Stripe docs or something like that, then the developers aren't going to be writing the documentation for the API. Yeah, it's going to be down to the product people that write things in that kind of language. So I really quite like that. So with the non-tech focus aside, what would you think would be the main benefit of using MSON versus Swagger or Open API?
Yeah, that's a very good question. Actually, the main selling point would be the simplicity and the learning curve. And when I was trying to document my API endpoints using Swagger before using Open API, and I found it's involved. You need to learn to do this. It's great, but for someone who is from a non-tech background and just want to have a good repository of their endpoints in a presentable way, where it doesn't look like just a tech document. It makes sense. It fits all the nuts together. And MSON plays a massive part in terms of syntaxing, using syntaxes in a human readable manner. So I think the simplicity is the main selling point in MSON over Open API.
Great. Okay, there's an interesting question from Piotr actually on the chat now. It says, how is the versioning of the endpoints represented? So is it the MSON setup in config? So that's an interesting point. How do you manage versioning of endpoints?
Yeah, this is actually one of the things I considered adding as a future enhancement. So as you change, and the history will maintain using the platform, so you can revert and go back to see what changed before, or what is the current state, and when this was happened, and who changed this. It's currently not supported by the platform, but it will be something I'll be adding in the future.
Okay, great. And then Barney asks in the chat as well, is there a way to use the tool with MSON sources tracked externally, for example, in Git?
As far as I understand, so the syntax or the documentation is in GitHub.
I believe that's the question that's being asked. Yeah. So would you be able to have the MSON source elsewhere and be able to use your tool with that?
Oh, to managing purposes. Good question. I haven't thought about it. Maybe I can add that to my list and think about. Actually, I was thinking loud. You can bring the document back to my platform if you like, and yeah, I think it makes sense all in one place. Yeah, I get that. Perhaps I need to think about that. Very good question. Thank you for that.
That's a feature request already, I think.
Already,
so,
yes.
So I was thinking, look, would it be possible to generate a document skeleton from the routing config? So would you be able to say hook into the debug router that you can do in Symfony, for example, and generate a document skeleton from there?
Right now, no, but that will be a very good addition to the tool, where your platform take care of the starting point of the document. Yeah, it will be a really good addition, which I will think about it as well.
Okay, another question's come through the chat actually. Is it possible to convert a Swagger document
to MSON? I wish I had that feature already, not right now, unfortunately, but I'm sure there are already tools available. But because I talk loud about MSON, I think I should add that to the tool. Hey, bring your open API and convert to MSON and use API documenter. Thank you for that question as well.
Yeah, I think that would be quite an interesting thing actually, to be able to compare the two side by side. Actually, so I noted down as well. So what are you using for parsing the MSON for generating your documents? Is there a component that you built for that, or was there something freely available that you were able to hook into in Symfony?
I use a JavaScript plugin called Drafter.js, which converts that MSON syntax, which you saw on the screen on the left, and it brings us a nicely tidied up array, which I iterated and produced this HTML. And the error handling also is already available in the Drafter. So actually, Drafter is doing the conversion from MSON to HTML or JavaScript array.
Okay, fantastic. And then when did you first hear of MSON? How did you kind of get into running with that as a format rather than using Swagger or OpenAPI?
This was the last year when I wanted to use a tool to generate endpoints and produce a presentable document to a non-tech personnel from a non-tech background. When I was researching, and then I found OpenAPI, obviously, and it's not that straightforward to learn, and then even if I learn and the end result is not that appealing, so you can't really present. I find it a bit difficult to convince those people. And then I found this MSON through API blueprint.org, and then I found out, yeah, this is quite easy readable and can do a lot, because I don't have to spend ages learning this, so I can spend my time on the platform and because I use MSON. This is how I got to know about MSON.
Okay, excellent. And Joanna, once again, thank you so much for coming and talking to us today. I think what we'll do is we'll let you we'll give you the rest of your evening back. We'll take you off the out of the spotlight, and we'll move on with the raffle. But once again, everybody, please give a round of applause for Anjana for coming in and giving us what was a frankly very interesting talk, and a tool that's really exciting, I think, to maybe get to use in the future. So thank you for joining us and giving us that presentation.
Thank you, Neil, and thank you, everyone.
Thank you. So what we're going to do now, I am going to share my screen. Cool. I assume everybody can see this. I'm going to make the screen size a little bigger, and we're going to wait for. We're waiting for Pauline, our second speaker, to come and join us as well. But in the meantime, look, we've got some prizes to give away. Let's hope that I can. Projects Symfony raffle. And what I'm desperately hoping this time around as well is that Joe Carter doesn't win yet another prize, because people are going to start to think that this is rigged in her favour, and I'm going to have to show you the code to show you that it isn't. Docker compose up. Showing off my Docker foo now. Hopefully this is all going to work. So, right, let's give away some prizes. So, PHP can't type. I can type when no one's watching. I can't type when people are. So, it's app. Pick.
I will come back to support you.
So, pick one, and this is going to be the first JetBrains one. The first JetBrains license tonight is going to. We only had 12 people join into the raffle today. So Adam Reddy, you have won the first JetBrains license tonight. I will send you an email with your license details in it within the next day or so. Congratulations. Okay, another second JetBrains license that we have is going out. So we've got 11 people now, so it now does remember who has won and who hasn't. So Timo, you have won our second JetBrains license for this month. Please do, if once I give the licenses to you, please do use them. And if you don't intend to use them, please let me know, and we can send them off to a good cause or something. Because every so often JetBrains email me and say, people aren't using the licenses, we're going to stop giving them out. So please do make sure you either use them or email me to tell me that you're not going to. And then finally, so the book prize, the book, as I say, is I've got my copy here, Grokking Algorithms, and it's got cartoons of different algorithms. It's got stuff about big O notation. It's got weasels and mice and these kinds of things inside. So we're giving away a copy of that. Who's won that? Picking winner, and the winner is Tamo. So Tamo, I will get in touch with you, and we will send out your prize. Well, I'll put you in touch with with Level, who are the prize sponsor, and they will get in touch with you about sending out a copy of the book. So congratulations, everybody there. Right, so how do I stop sharing? So listen, we've got a few minutes to kill, I guess, before Pauline joins us. She's not here yet. So what should we talk about, folks? Give me. Thank you, Barney, by the way, for saying nice laptop. Let's. What should we talk about? Put in the chat what you want to talk about for a few minutes whilst we wait for our second speaker. Or Anjana, you can come back on and we can have a chat maybe about some more MSON for a couple of minutes.
Yeah. Hello.
So yeah, so give me some more benefits of the MSON.
Yeah, it's. I think MSON is really straightforward and has lots of community support to it. I know it's not like massive as open API, but it has lots of potential if you really like tuned into it and you can really follow it through. I think that's a good, and in the future also it's prospective in terms of it's all open sourced and backed by lots of other companies as well.
Yeah, cool. So you are. Oh, I noticed on your LinkedIn actually that you're wearing the same shirt that you're wearing tonight.
Yes, that is true.
Yeah. So you're the web development team leader at MyHSM. So you're using API Documenter there, or you're using MSON where you are? Are you using it in a production setting?
Yeah, I do use API documentation for my personal projects and from in the places that where I used before, and I find it easy to maintain and sort of present endpoints to the customers in a presentable manner, and it just doesn't take me that long to create documents. I think Pauline is here.
Yes, Pauline is here. Hi, Pauline. How are you?
Hi, good. How are you?
Very well, thank you. You are absolutely just in time. We weren't freaking out yet about if you were going to make it.
Okay, good.
I'm so glad you've come to join us tonight. Are you ready to dive straight in, or do you need to do any kind of setup? Fantastic. So we've got a few people watching on the stream. We've just done our raffle. We've had some lucky prize winners. They're getting, I don't know if you saw, but they're getting a copy of this book, Grokking Algorithms, which I've been told is extremely good. I haven't read my copy yet, but we've got a copy of that to give away.
Books are always the best prize in raffles.
Of course, yeah. So we're giving physical copies away as well. None of that PDF stuff. But once again, thank you so much for giving up your time. I know you're like an hour ahead of us as well, so it's already getting quite late for you. So you've come to join us. You've given up your free time. You're going to talk to us about implementing social login on your Symfony websites. I'm just going to hand the stage over to you. Please give us an introduction to yourself, and feel free just to run with it and do whatever you want to do. And everybody at home, please give a big round of applause to Pauline.
Thank you. I'll just hear that applause in my mind and just assume that it's there. Very kind, very kind. All right, thank you for the introduction. So let's get social. That's the name of my talk, and it's about implementing social login in your Symfony application. So to give a little bit more of an intro, this is my intro. Hi, so my name is Pauline, as you already heard. I'm a software engineer from Amsterdam, and I do mostly back in PHP in Symfony, but also since recently, like a year ago or 2 years ago, I've been doing React as well at Werkspot, which is a little bit like my builder in the UK, if you know of it. It's a sister company as well. So I'm a speaker, as you can see, but mostly about Git. So if you have any Git questions, feel free to hit me up. That's my handle on Twitter if you're into that sort of stuff. And I recently became June's mother. That's June. She's now 10 months old. And as you can see, she's very, very cute. And she's also the reason that I just jumped into the call halfway through, because she had to be put to bed. Hopefully she stays asleep. Okay, so back to the order of the day. Why would you want to implement social login in your Symfony application? Hopefully this is not a color that's super bright and super hard on your eyes at this hour. Okay, good. So why would you want to implement social login or sign up in your application? Okay, so if you have any type of conversion in your application, you're probably familiar with this funnel shape that POs and PMs might confront you with to signify kind of a drop-off in conversion in the whole user journey until conversion. So let's say you have a fancy hat store, and there's a landing page and it lists all the fancy hats. And like the funnel shape, again, represents the amount of users that are dropping off at each step. So from that landing page, they select a nice hat, let's say this top hat. A few users have dropped off, no drama llama. And then next step is they add it to the basket. another couple users drop off, but again, not super drastic. But then something happens and you lose a lot of users. A lot of users drop off. So can you think of the moment that might happen? So for a lot of people, that is this step where they all of a sudden are presented with this big daunting form, and they have to put in their customer details, full name and address, often billing address, shipping address, phone number for some reason, sometimes even gender, which is always a little puzzling to me, especially when it's something like fancy hats. Okay, so there's another option that makes it a little bit easier for your users, and that is social login or sign up. So this is an example from Etsy. They offer a pretty simple registration form. And then as an alternative, they offer to register you or log in with Google, Facebook, or Apple. So what happens is they take the information that you've already given to either Google, Facebook, or Apple, and they request that information so that they have it and they can continue with your order or registration or whatever. Okay, so there's a few benefits, of course. Biggest one is ease of use for the user, means higher conversion. People are not going to drop off as quickly. Then another kind of benefit that you might not think of as much is that there's no password required for this type of login. So returning users that may have forgotten their password, for instance, they might never convert again because they don't want to go through the whole reset password flow or whatever. And they don't have to think of a complicated password. So that's another small, but it's still an advantage. Okay. It's a national holiday here, by the way. It's King's Day, so please forgive me for drinking a beer. It's like, it's the law. You have to have a beer on King's Day. It's not. Okay. So if you're going to use social sign up / login, you're probably going to be using OAuth 2. So OAuth 2 is an authentication standard, and it's used by most of these third parties nowadays. So like if you're going to use Facebook, Apple, Google, GitHub, whatever, you're probably going to be using OAuth 2. So we're not going to go into the nitty gritty details of it, but this is what it is basically. And we'll kind of have a watered down explanation of what it does. So let's say you're a user and you have some personal details, like your name and address. That is seen as a resource in an OAuth 2 context. And that makes you, the user, the resource owner. Now you've registered an account with Twitter at some point, and you've given Twitter your resource, your personal information. So Twitter now is a resource server in this OAuth 2 context. They have your resource and they can serve it to whoever else. Then there's your client application, and it wants this resource. In order to get this resource, it has to ask Twitter, the resource server, using an access token. So first you need to obtain this access token. And simply put, Twitter first will check if the user is logged in with Twitter on that device, whether it be like a browser or your phone or whatever. So it will check if you're logged in, and if they're not logged in, then they just show you the regular Twitter login prompt, and then they check that, and then they go, okay. They check that against their settings of your client application, like, okay, is this client application registered with us, blah, blah, blah. And then if everything goes well, you get an access token, and then you can use that access token to get the resource. Thank you. Okay, so there's a few different ways to obtain the access token. So again, this is a very simplified diagram, but there's a few different ways of actually getting this access token from the points of the user logging in. And the most used one is probably the authorization code flow. You're hearing the cat flap, by the way, if you were wondering, my cat is coming in and out. So the authorization code flow will work completely kind of server-side, but with redirects. So your client application really just points redirect to to the resource server and back. And you're doing that round tripping certain data. So for instance, one thing that's round tripped is the redirect URI. So your client application tells the resource server where to redirect the user to after this whole flow is over. And that's one thing that's completely round tripped back to you. And that's also one way that the resource server gives the authorization code back to you. Okay, so this is how that works. So your client redirects your user to the resource server, bearing credentials and the redirect URI. Then the resource server checks if the user is logged in, then sends the authorization code back. And then your client application redirects the user back again, bearing that same authorization code, which then Twitter will check, like, is this the same authorization code I've just sent? And if so, then that's fine, and it will send you the access token. And then you can do an API call or whatever you want to do to fetch the actual resource. Now, of course, there are some checks here, and there has to be some way for the resource server to manage kind of the authorization codes and the access tokens and stuff like that. So you have to register your client application with the resource server. And this is an example of what that looks like. This is Google. So on the left, you'll have the authorized redirect URIs for this authorization code flow. So this is basically, you have to list all the redirect URIs that are valid to send the user back to, because obviously they don't want someone to be redirected to a completely different application that you didn't intend to send them to. And then on the right, there's authorized JavaScript origins. So this is for a different flow, which is a completely server-side flow or client-side flow, which I'm not going to go into because, first of all, I'm not fully sure how it completely works. Something about CSRF tokens. But also, there's really no need to know it, because most third parties like Facebook, Google, blah, 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 will have like an SDK or some sort of JavaScript snippet that will help you handle these calls back and forth. Okay, so I'll show you a quick example of the Facebook SDK. So this is an example that comes straight from their documentation. If you're not super well versed in JavaScript, don't worry, I'll talk you through it. So the middle bit there, middle hunk there, as they call it in version control, is a call, an SDK call. So the SDK object is called FB, and it has a method get login status, and that get login status has a callback, very common in JavaScript, with the response that is received. And then with that response, you call your own function status change callback. So you handle that response with that method, or with that function. That's the top function there. So the top function takes a response and just sees if the status sent back with the response is connected. And if so, it calls test API. And if not, it prints, please log into this web page. Kind of a bogus error message, but it's however you would handle them not being logged in, basically. Not being logged in or not authorizing your application, because I forgot to mention that. Not only would Twitter check if you're logged in to Twitter with that device, but also if you're actually allowing, of course, Twitter to share the data with your client application. So it can be those two things that like end you up in that please log into this web page state. But if it is connected, you're going to call test API, and you'll see that the bottom function test API has another SDK call, which is just an API call to an endpoint called /me, which is quite common in this OAuth 2 thing. /me is usually just the logged in users' basic resources, like first name, last name, for instance. And again, it has a callback that uses the response from that endpoint, and it prints the name and says, okay, thanks for logging in, blah, blah, blah. but of course, we're at Symfony UK, so chances are you're running Symfony Shop and you don't have a single page application where you just have to check the login status once, and the user can perform all sorts of stuff just on that page. You probably want to create a user in the backend, or make sure that user exists in your backend or whatever user management you use, and start a session so that the user can navigate through different pages in your application, and there's just a session. They don't have to constantly do this OAuth 2 flow. So what you could do is when they're connected, you could do a call to your backend and just to your normal login endpoint. And then Symfony loads the user using a user provider. And you could take your standard user provider and kind of decorate that, like in this example, and just say load user by OAuth user response, and it takes the response. And then it tries to load an existing user from your standard user provider by username, which in this case would be email. And if that doesn't exist, it creates a new user and then returns that created user. So pretty easy peasy to just handle all of that in Symfony. You just have to make sure that you wire this implementation instead of your standard user provider for OAuth 2 stuff, and then you're finished. So the end, you might think. But no, of course not. We've just gotten started. We're only 15 minutes in. And as we all know, there's always trade-offs and caveats and all that stuff. So let's take a look at that. So one thing is, if you're going to go the SDK route, you have to be comfortable with and want to support JavaScript, because not all applications, of course, support JavaScript or want to support JavaScript. Every third party, and this is a big one, I think, has its own SDK, response object shape, stuff like that, its own endpoints and things like that. So if you're going to implement 3 different ones, then you have to somehow make that generic, or really, customize all the different SDK/API calls and transform the data, blah, blah, blah. So that's quite a bit of effort. And, for whatever other reason, you might want to have your entire login flow handled server-side. So, of course, there's bundles for this. There's 2 ones that I've found that are pretty well maintained and actively used. So there's the KMPU OAuth 2 client bundle and the HWI OAuth bundle. I think the KMPU OAuth 2 client bundle is the slightly newer one, but they are pretty similar in activity and maintenance, and also in functionality. Last time I checked, the only difference really was that HWI OAuth bundle is shipped with a register endpoint, and that user provider that we just had that implementation, so something like that. So it's shipped with that, but also last time I checked the documentation for that, which isn't very long ago, the documentation for that register endpoint wasn't super good, and it's pretty simple to make your own user provider as per the example before. So it's not that much of a difference really. But we are going to look at the HWI OAuth bundle. So let's see how it's configured. First, you're going to have to configure the firewalls that it's going to be active for. So here we have the security area firewall. And there's 2, under OAuth, there's 2 resource owners, which is kind of a misnomer because the resource owner is the user. The resource server would be Facebook and Google. Regardless, resource owners, you have to put Facebook and Google or whatever else you do. Now the names can be whatever you want. The bundle doesn't really care. What the bundle does care about is that the name is the same as whatever comes after the check dash in the endpoint, because it kind of generates that endpoint based on that resource owner name as a parameter. And then as you can see, a bit lower, as the OAuth user provider, you just add your user provider that you've created, or the one that's shipped with HWI OAuth bundle, for instance. Then there's another bit of configuration under for the bundle specifically. So you have to tell it which firewall names it's active for. So in this case, it's only secured area. And then you have to configure the resource owners a bit more. So here's Google. Again, name doesn't matter. But another thing that does matter is the type, because the bundle does use this type to figure out which value objects to use for the response data. So the type is important and needs to match what the bundle is expecting, just so it knows how to kind of where to send, what endpoints to send the user to, and how to transform the data that it gets back. And then credentials, of course. And then there is the scope, which is basically the data that you want to be able to access. So this, if the user hasn't given you previous access to their resource, which they probably wouldn't have because you're just wiring this bundle just now, it would show up in that little modal that you probably know, where it's like, oh, it wants to share this and that information. And so that would be defined with the scope. So in this case, it would say like email, and profile is like first name, last name, for instance. It's just basic information. So pretty straightforward. And then there's Facebook, and you'll notice that looks pretty much the same, except for the scope, which in this case is public profile and email. So it's the same data, but slightly different scope names, because that is just difference per resource server. Unfortunately, there's also not really a way to kind of make that generic for the bundle, because it doesn't know what kind of scopes every third party has, of course, and what you want to do. So you still have to kind of dig into the documentation for the specific resource servers there. But I mean, minimal effort, we can do it. And then there's some extra options that you can add, like a CSRF token, for instance. CSRF token, if you're using the SDK, is usually, if not always, again, I'm not sure how that client-side authorization process works exactly, but I think it uses a CSRF token as part of checking if you're really the client application that is doing these calls. And then there's a state parameter. So a state parameter is round trip, like the redirect URI, for instance. So a state parameter you can send as a query parameter, so just a question mark state or whatever, and then it equals whatever. And it's a standard in OAuth 2, so every OAuth 2 flow should be round tripping this thing. You can't round trip just at anything, just the redirect URI and the state thing, for instance. So you can send some application state, and then you can expect it to come back at some point, and then you can do stuff with it. That being said, I don't really understand the use case of configuring it here. And I'll kind of try to explain why. If anyone can think of a use case, I'd love to hear it. But one useful thing about state parameters is, for instance, take this example for Airbnb. If you try to register on Airbnb, you might want to register as either a host or a regular user who's trying to rent whatever for their vacation. So there's two different, specifically different users. So either a host or a regular user. So if you have an SPA, or it doesn't even matter if it's an SPA or not, but if you're the other way around, if it's server side, sorry, and you're doing those redirects, then you have to use the state parameter to be able to get this state of like, oh, did they click the host button or the regular user button, for instance. With an SPA, you wouldn't have to do that because you can keep that state client side, because you're not losing any state redirecting. But with the redirects, you would be losing that state. So then you can kind of add the state parameter to the redirect, and it will come back to you. And then you can figure out like, okay, is this person trying to log in / register as a host or as a regular user? So that's how that would work. So with that redirect flow, you get things sent back and forth. One of those things is a redirect URL. And then one of them is the state parameter with some state. So a common way to do this would be to have some sort of nonce that you store somewhere, for instance, in a key value storage like Redis or whatever. And then you assign some state to, or some data to that hash. So when you send the state and it comes back to you, you can do a lookup of that hash and kind of match, see what data is connected to that thing. So that's one way to keep the state that you had at the time of clicking, for lack of a better word. This is quite handy because, of course, the state parameter is just one parameter, so it doesn't really allow you to send more things. You can try, but it's just not going to round trip. So this is a really nice and neat way to kind of be able to have more than one piece of data sending along with your state. Or you could really also just technically, it's a little bit ugly, but you can send just a JSON string with any data that you might want to have round tripped. What the HWAI OAuth bundle does is I think you have to base64 JSON encode the data. So you have JSON and then you base64 that, and that is what you put in the state parameter. And HWAI OAuth bundle make sure that that's decoded and put in like a state value object. It's funny that I had to think about that because I actually wrote that part and I completely forgot how I did it. Oh, it might be useful to say that because I said I didn't really understand the use case of that configuration state bit. I did not implement that part because that would be kind of strange if I didn't understand the use case for something that I implemented myself. Okay. But again, that's kind of why I don't understand this addition to the configuration, just because, you know, this configuration, that's a solid state that's not going to change per button or per action that the user performs. Like that state is not going to change. So then I don't really see the point, as you could just probably just pop that into whatever configuration. So yeah, if anyone can think of a use case, please let me know. So this is what it would look like if you just implement these buttons in your Twig templates or whatever. So at the top, you have one without a state parameter. You'll see that it just has a call to path, and you give it the service, which is Google, which is just the resource owner name, right? The one that you just made up yourself. It could be foobar or whatever. And then it'll compile the login path for that resource owner that you set up with a /login/check- whatever. And then the second one is the same, except this one has a state parameter, and you can just put the state parameter just hard coded kind of like next to your path, and then it will just be part of the link. It's pretty straightforward. And then if you're Airbnb, you can do something like this with your user provider. So if you take the user provider example that we had before, this time you can get the state from the resource owner value object that's shipped with the bundle. And that's that state value object that I was talking about that gets hashed and then unhashed, whatever. And then it tries to, just like before, it tries to load the user with your standard user provider. Now, I didn't put this in this example, but it would be nicer to check if the existing user, if it exists, actually matches the type of user that you're sending in your state. Because of course, if they're clicking the host button and they already exist as a regular user, then you want to handle that in some way. But yeah, just silly example anyway. And then if it doesn't exist, you can create a new user using that data and the user type state. So now you've registered that user as specifically as a host or as a regular user. Okay, So one last thing, really big caveat, kind of, if you're working with dynamic environments and stuff, that we had some issues with, is that it's pretty hard to test. Because if you look at the authorized redirect URIs, you'll see that there's like a different URI for each environment that we have. We have production, we have dev, we have staging, and you even see some like very specific branch names. So if you're working with dynamic environments where you just deploy whatever to whatever test environment and it just gets randomly assigned a URL, unfortunately, you can't just do automated testing on that with the real resource servers, because they don't allow you, at least I've never found one, to allow like a wildcard redirect URI. And I'm sure there's a good reason for that. So I'd be surprised if you did find one that did allow that. But so what happens is that you have to manually add these redirect URIs for every different environment that you want to try this on. So you can't like dynamically add one or wildcard it or whatever. So that's super annoying, because then your automated tests would just fail randomly for different environments. So there's no real nice solution for this. Like Facebook does, for instance, offer a test user that you can use for automated testing. But of course, that's still not going to work with different environments if you have to set each of them up manually. So what we ended up having to do, and this is apparently the only real kind of semi-nice solution that you have to that you can implement, is to have your own little test auth provider, and then just set that as a test resource owner, and you do your automated testing on that. So we have a really simple test OAuth server that's based on, I think it's something like Node OAuth. I can't remember what the bundle is called, but you can check on the GitHub page, which I'll share later. But it's I'll show you how it works, but it's really simple. It really only supports Facebook right now as a type. If you want to use it and you want to support more types, just shoot me a message, or like create an issue or whatever, or create one yourself. But yeah, so it only supports the Facebook type, because obviously you're dealing with like a specific response object structure that the bundle needs to understand how to transform. So yeah, again, it's super simple and barely any functionality yet, but this is basically how it works. You just start the server, and then you can just do really simple calls to it, and it just has bogus credentials, doesn't matter. And so you just have this user, but sometimes you might want to, which was our case, we wanted to have different types of email addresses, so you can do that in the state. So this is that base64, and then like a JSON object with, I think it was test email is the property. And then you can have different email addresses. In our case, we wanted to do that because we had parallel test processes running. So we didn't want to be kind of we didn't want to have like conflicting tests, like where you create a user and then in the next test you're checking that they're, like, you delete a user and then in the next test you check that they're there or whatever, and they have the same email address, so that conflicts. So we wanted to be able to like kind of send specific or get back specific email addresses per test. So that's one way you can do that. So yeah, feel free to use it if you want, and feel free to contribute, of course. And this is how you would kind of set up your own test server. So you just do another resource owner that's called test server. Again, yeah, name doesn't matter. But you do have to put the type as Facebook if you're going to use this one, because that's the only structure, it's the only response object shape it supports. And then the scope is also extremely basic. So just for first name, last name, and email. And then the access token URL and the authorization URL and the infos URL is just the user info URL basically. I have to point to wherever your test server is running, and you can just have that running somewhere separately. And then of course you have to also add it here. And that's about it. So I hope that was useful. Sorry if I went ranty at times, because I haven't done this one in a while. So I hope it wasn't too hard to follow.
No, I think it's well. Everybody at home, please once again give Polly a massive round of applause, and thank you so much for coming and chatting to us. Yeah, so you brought back a whole load of memories of doing OAuth there for me, and it was kind of a dark place of memories to go down, especially states and this and the other. I managed to forget all about those, but I particularly liked your visual description of the OAuth flow. I thought that was great, because that was kind of sort of very visual thing there that was really put it well. So we've got a question through the chat from Piotr, who says, you've shown some parameters within the scope configurations. Is there a place or list or resource to find these scopes? And do these parameters change? Like, why does Facebook have changed profile into public_profile?
Yeah, so it's not really a change that they've done. It's just how they've defined their API, basically. It's literally just like the fields that they've defined that you get back. So there's not a standard for it. Also, because as you can imagine, not every resource server is going to have the same data. For instance, PayPal will have your billing address, but Twitter might not, for instance. Maybe they can if you have ads running or something. But yeah, so there's different, so there can't really be a standard. I don't think there's like a central resource that I know of that lists all of them. That might be nice to create, actually. But yeah, so the resources that I would look at would just be the specific resource servers documentation. As far as I know, that's the only place you can find it. And regarding changing the scope fields, you are, as with most third-party software, kind of at the mercy of their versioning. So I'm assuming that Facebook is not going to be silly enough to just change their scope fields completely, because yeah, it would be kind of silly to have BC breaks for just users all over the world. But yeah, at the end of the day, like with anything third party, you will be at the mercy of what they decide or decide not to change.
Yeah, I did start writing down, actually, as you were talking earlier. Does either of the bundles that you mentioned allow easy merging of accounts? For example, if somebody logs in with email the first time round and then uses Facebook the next. But I think you then kind of covered that in when you had your social user provider, and you said, you would probably cover this or whatever there. But I guess I don't suppose you know what kind of percentage of people might sign up with an email the first time round and then use a social provider the next time round or anything like that. Is that some kind of stat that you're aware of?
Well, it depends on how you want to implement it. I know that there's a lot of applications. You'll probably find that in the wild from now on, if you're actively thinking about it, there's a lot of applications that don't allow you to log in through social login if you don't have a registered account yet, because they don't want to screw around with, now these people don't have a password. So they want to make sure that you're already registered on the website, so that the registration skip isn't foregone, basically, but the login step will be simplified. But the way we implement it is kind of the way I showed it. So that if you are not an existing user yet, then you're just going to be created using the email address that you get back from the resource server. And if you are a registered user, you're just going to be logged in through that user if it matches the email address that we get back from the resource server. Of course, when you register a new user, they're going to be registered without a password. So that's a little bit tricky, because for us, if a person is registered through social login, and then next time they try to log in with the regular login form, it'll say like, you don't have a password, and it'll kind of request you to reset your password. So you just go through the reset password flow to create a password, or it'll say like, okay, just log in through social login again, because you can't log in with password because you don't have one.
Yeah, so I guess you're using the social logins at Workspot then.
Yeah.
And that's do you find then that increases conversion rates on bringing users into the platform and has a real tangible effect on decreasing drop-off rates?
Yeah, for sure. It definitely had a very significant impact on the conversion. Although at some point, and that's also why I added the testing stuff, because when we implemented it, the testing stuff, of course, was a little bit like we weren't really sure how to test it, and we couldn't really find a nice way to test it, and it was a lot of effort and deadlines and pressure and stuff. So we were just like, all right, we've unit tested what we can, just get it live. And then at some point, conversion started dropping again, and they were about to discontinue the social login because it wasn't working. And I was like, okay, I don't believe this. I think something's just broken and we don't know because we never covered it. So then I was just like, okay, let's get cracking with this to test server. And then, yeah, it turned out that several things were broken about it, and it was just never caught because it's just such a pain to test. So yeah, if you do implement it, it will help, but make sure you actually cover it, because there's a lot of stuff that can go wrong. Oh, another thing that can go wrong, sorry. But one really finicky thing that's annoying is that with that manual registration of your client application on Facebook or Google or whatever, you can have one typo and the whole login flow, like in production or whatever, is broken because you just mistyped or changed something about the redirect URI, for instance. And you'll never know unless you manually try to log in yourself on production. And you can't reproduce it on staging because it's specifically that URL, you know what I mean? So that's really annoying. In fact, I once accidentally deleted the entire client application on Facebook. So that was fun. I had to like really quickly remake it, like update the credentials, boom. Luckily it was live pretty quickly, but that was kind of scary. What I was trying to do was get my personal permissions revoked. And then I just deleted. So that was cool. That was
that's kind of that's the new dropping the prod database, right?
Yeah. I mean, it wasn't quite that bad, thank God, but it was one of those, silly mistakes.
It's one of those moments where you realize what you've done and the color drains from your face, and
yeah, exactly.
and you're in a mad panic to it. Fantastic. Okay. Barney's asked a question through the chat. I've just noticed this actually. So, are you allowing people to use the anonymity they can get through signing with Apple's masked email address system? And does that cause any for managing user accounts?
Can you repeat that question?
Yeah, sure. So are you allowing people to use the anonymity they can get through sign in with Apple's masked email address system? And does that cause any for managing? I think that might be. Does that cause any problems for managing user accounts? I think we may be missing a word in the question there. Does that cause any problems for managing user accounts? I think would be the question.
Well, I wasn't aware of this feature. Secondly, we don't use Apple in our social login implementation, so I don't know, but my best guess would be that there would still be some sort that you wouldn't be able to like register new users, because then you'd have that weird conflict of like, if they then try to come back and log in with their email address, they can't because it won't match what you get back from Apple. But what would be my best guess is that if you have an existing user and you do the login flow once, that there will be some external reference that Apple would give you that you can store with your user management, and then you can check against that instead of the email address. Would be my guess, but I'm not sure, so don't quote me on it.
Yeah. Okay, yeah. But I mean, Barney's clarified that was the intended question. Sure, if you haven't used it, you haven't used it. I mean, I haven't used it either, so I think that's a perfectly reasonable best guess. And thank you so much for us.
Did you say that was the intended question, or that wasn't?
That was the intended question, yes. So
okay, good.
yeah. So does it cause any problems? Yeah. Okay. So we've got a question from Chris here. So Chris says, do refresh tokens come into play with social login, or am I thinking about a different OAuth 2 grant type?
No, I think they do. I think probably, if I'm not mistaken, more often so with the client side version. But I do think you can get refresh tokens as well on the server side, of course. But they just you don't have to use them that often, as often, because access tokens will be valid for longer, I think, but I'm not sure. But I'm sure that refresh tokens are actually part of OAuth 2, yes. So
yeah.
You're not thinking of something different.
It's been so long since I've dared to go down the OAuth route that I simply have nothing to add on to that. So once again, thank you so much for coming and presenting to us. I don't have a beer to raise to you for your bank holiday, but I'm British, so I've got a big mug of tea. So cheers. And again, everybody at home, please, another massive round of applause for Pauline for coming and presenting to us. And with that, I think we will say goodnight to everybody at home. Thank you so much for joining us, everybody. And we'll see you again in 2 months' time. Again, we'll use YouTube. I think this is working quite well for us. Far fewer panics and technical issues this time around. So I think we'll keep with this format unless anybody really disagrees. If you do, please let me know. But we're going to work on scheduling the next meetup for, what are we now? Is it April? Yeah. So end of June probably, and we'll figure something out and let you all know. And with that, I'm going to stop